again. You made a way when there was no way. And I believe I'll see you do it again. I've seen you move. You move mountains. And I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way. And I believe I'll see you do it again. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. Good morning. Whoa. Whoa. I'm sorry, y'all. I had to get it out. I woke up this morning and my spirit was just rocking. It was like, I've seen you move. You move mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way. Yes. I think that song came straight from the ancestors. Woo! I could just see our ancestors. I could just dream about them, man. Out there in the field, singing. I've seen you move. You move mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. Move that slave master out of the way, oh God. My future's gonna be free. I might be picking this right now, but I know that there's a generation coming after me. Ooh, oh. Yep, that's what I believe. I believe they saw us coming. And I believe that there are some of you today that see the next generation coming. And so your song has to match the generation coming. That's not in my notes today. Woo! But if you want things to change, your song has to match the generation coming, right? Sam Cooke, I believe, said it's been a long time coming, but a change is gonna come, right? He was singing, that song is so very timeless because in many ways he was singing to a generation to come. Somebody gonna catch that tomorrow. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host, Shantae Charles. This is my official greeting. I'm your host, Shantae Charles. I'm so glad that you chose to be with us today. Take a moment, go ahead and share this broadcast out because we're about to get it on and popping today. Today is Black Table Talk, Teachable Tuesday, Black History, all the time, all the time, all the time. Good morning, Lady Kenyatta. Good morning to those of you who are watching on our YouTube live stream. Good morning, Lady Barbara. Good morning, Prophet Jonathan. Good morning, Pastor Ben. Good morning to each of you that whose names I may not be able to see on the screen, but I know that you're watching. Good morning to those of you who are watching by your laptop and you cannot join in the conversation. And good morning to those of you who are watching through your Twitter feed. All right, I want to say good morning to each of you. Tweet me out, share this broadcast. If you're watching on YouTube, share it to your Facebook page, tweet it out, do whatever you need to do. So today, we are again continuing our studies in Black history. I actually have four books in front of me. I don't know how many of them I'm going to be able to get through, but I'm going to try to do my best today. On yesterday, I attended a lecture that I almost didn't make it to because the weather up here has been really spotty. And so I was actually getting ready to cancel. That's why I didn't announce it on yesterday. But the weather cleared up, warmed up some, and I was able to get out to an event that I call a seminal moment in history. It is not every day that you get to see and hear Michael Eric Dyson, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, in person for free. Okay? So I was like, let me get my happy self out here and make this happen. So I'm thankful to have a wonderful husband who is supportive of my mission, of the things that I believe that God has called me to do in this hour. And many of you know in one of our previous seasons, we actually read Dr. Dyson's first book, Tears We Cannot Stop, A Letter to White America. We read that aloud in a previous season of Daring Dialogues. And now he has a new book out that I started reading a little bit because I do want to bring it into our Tuesdays. But he actually did a lecture on it last night. What Truth Sounds Like, RFK, James Baldwin, and our unfinished conversation about race in America. Now, he was on the campus of Loyola University in Baltimore, their Evergreen campus. Beautiful campus. In case you didn't know, Loyola University is a Jesuit Catholic university. And if you've done any study on the Jesuits, you know the significance of that. And if you've done anything on the Catholics, you know the significance of that. Actually, them actually bringing him to speak on race, which I found very surprising. Dr. Dyson himself is a professor at Georgetown University. So hopefully, I will be connecting with him in the future and possibly bringing him on to maybe have a conversation with us, which I think would be really awesome. You can go back on my Periscope, and I'm going to try to upload it to YouTube as well today. But you can go back on my Periscope and watch his entire lecture that I was able to film. And I will warn you, his language was off the charts, both intellectually and on the profanity side. But the things that he had to say concerning our nation, concerning our country, tinged with his own flavor, were very, very, very impactful. I wanted to go over a couple of things that he said. I won't cover everything. I did take notes. All right. But he did not hold back. He did not, because the crowd was predominantly white, believe it or not. I mean, it's Loyola University. But he did not hold back with the crowd. He told it like it was. He brought out some very, very strong things concerning America's amnesia about her past, both the good and the bad. So I'm going to share a couple of things that he said from that, and then I'm going to go on to our books for today. So he started out by saying that society is deeply attracted to the past, that American society is deeply attracted to the past. But yet, when it comes to Black people, when it comes to African Americans in this country, we are consistently telling Black people to forget. Or we're consistently telling African Americans in particular to get over it. Well, you can't get over it if the past continues to be present, right? If MLK over 50 years ago now was talking about police brutality and the need for accountability in that area, and we're still talking about it in 2019, then you can't get over what is still present, right? If they were talking about 50 years ago how black people were being sort of herded into certain areas and sections of the country and walled in ghettos, right? And now we not only have black people being walled in, but we have black people being pushed out to the point where housing is becoming a near impossible feat. Oh, excuse me. Where housing is becoming an impossible feat, right? Where people are struggling to pay rent. They're struggling to um, get homes for a affordable price. Not that you can't find a home, but when you go and look at the housing market, and I know there are some people on here who can attest to that, when you look at the housing market, a 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom home is costing the price of something that you might have been able to get a 4 bedroom, 2 bedroom home on not 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? So people are wondering, why is the housing market jumping so astronomically in pricing when the average person's income is not increasing at the level of the rate of housing? So what you have is people who are working full time, right? Or they're working two full-time jobs and sometimes three full-time jobs, and they're still not making enough money to cover their basic needs because the cost of living is going up, but the income is not increasing at the rate of the cost of living. So when that happens, that has nothing to do with somebody being lazy or not having a job or not wanting to work. It's the market itself is causing the shift. All right? Because a lot of people get accused of, well, you're just lazy and you just need to make more money. Well, if you're working three jobs and you're still not making your ends meet, that's not you. That is a system that needs to be adjusted. And guess what? There are people who operate that system that can adjust it. They're called the feds. Ever heard of them? They are the ones who in the financial area, they're the ones who determine the interest rates and the market rates. There's the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund. These are people who decide internationally what rates and percentages and things should be that begin to regulate the other markets that affect our day-to-day life. So it's not just a thing of, oh, this person is not working and they're lazy. That's why they don't have enough money. No, there's a larger picture that needs to be taken a look at. So he called, I found this term interesting. He called Maryland and Virginia the soft South. I was like, wow, that's a really good way of putting it. Because people tend to think that Maryland, especially, and that the further you go up, that it's considered the North. And so people have this mindset that, well, if you live in the North, you're not experiencing as much racism as you would in the South. And having lived here in this region now for 8 years, I beg to differ. I would actually venture to say there's more racism here than I experienced in Florida. Like the first 3 years I was here, I experienced so many discrimination tactics that equaled my entire time living in Florida. I was like, whoa, what is this? And why is this? But I would say that the racism here is very covert. People can just look you straight in the face and discriminate against you. or they can lie with a straight face and still be discriminating against you. And unless God somehow shows it to you or reveals it to you, or somebody slips and you overhear something or you see something in writing, you don't even realize the ways you're being discriminated against. Whereas in the South, if people don't like you, they're just going to come out and say, I don't like you. And they're going to come out and tell you why. And you may hear the N word several times, right? You will get the verbal N word in the South. You will get the physical actions of what you do to the N word in the North. So I thought that was a very interesting term. The other piece he said here, he began to talk about the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement, and how those movements were not available for Black women in colonial America. There was no place for Black women to go and voice their concerns about being taken advantage of by their slave masters. And then he did make the comment that we want to act like Thomas Jefferson was the only person involved, right, in that sort of action, when the reality is that was more common than not, because they were not just property of their masters, but they were also sexual property of their masters. The other piece he talked about here, let me go to my notes. He said, the degree to which America is addicted to who we are is a denial. There's a denial there. And then he said, race is a social construct, and it is what we make of it. Race is a social construct, and it is what we make of it. Oftentimes, I like to add to that, race is a social construct that has real consequences for the people in which it is applied to. So you can tell me all day, as he was saying in his speech, you can tell me all day, race is a social construct, it's not really real. But the fact is, Black Americans are being impacted in reality by a social construct that was made up. So yes, we can say somebody made this thing up, but the reality is the thing that they made up is actually impacting people in real life. People are being discriminated against because of the color of their skin. All right. He also said, which I think gathered a collective gasp from the crowd, and that is, the real religion is whiteness in America. The real religion is whiteness in America. And I think we sort of touched on that a little bit yesterday. The fact that regardless of what your label is in America, whether the person is white, or whether the person is straight, or whether the person is sees themselves as homosexual or pansexual, whether the person is atheist, or whether the person is Jewish, or whether the person is Catholic, or whether the person is evangelical, whether the person is rich, or whether the person is poor, whether the person is female, or whether the person is male. There is a large section of our country that congregates around whiteness. And we saw it in our election results, because people were saying, what happened? How did this person lose the popular vote by 3 million, but they won the electoral college and gained the presidency? And at first, people were puzzled. And I said, then, this is not hard to figure out. Some people tried to say, well, it was just the white evangelicals that pushed him over. I said, no, this is not hard to figure out. People who claim to be liberal and people who claim to be educated enough on the facts and the issues still went into the voting booth and they voted their whiteness. People who claim to know Jesus, people who claim to know justice and mercy and love and compassion and fairness and all those things that they're supposed to stand for in the body, right? Because in Christendom, we're supposed to be all one body. Well, part of the body went in the voting booth and decided that their whiteness was more important than their faith. And sure enough, as the data came in, that's what it revealed. It revealed that people in all of these different categories that they were not expecting to agree with the current administration actually went in and agreed with the current administration. But why? Why did they agree with the current administration? They agreed with the current administration because the current administration promised and is continuing to uphold and protect whiteness, period. So this is why it does not matter if he lies. It does not matter what his personal life looks like. It does not matter how he disparages other people. As long as he continues to do his number one job, which is to uphold whiteness, white people will continue to stand with him. Period. Period. So if we want to see a change, the only way that change is going to come is if he is no longer living in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue come 2020. How do we know this is true? That they're going to continue to stand with him? Because even the Democrats, the quote unquote liberals, all right, who are supposed to be on the side of the quote unquote minorities, who's supposed to be on the side of the disadvantaged, who's supposed to be on the side of women, who's supposed to be on the side of the disenfranchised, even they will not lift their finger to even put forth a resolution of impeachment. They won't even acknowledge that he needs to be impeached as a collective. So don't tell me that you are for me when you can't even do the basics that you have been put into office to do. You've been put there to recognize when there is an imbalance, when there is corruption. That's what you've been put there to do. The American people elected you because they thought that you would actually get to the bottom of what's happening, that you would actually acknowledge certain things. But no, because he's protecting the overarching goal of whiteness, they said, we're not going to impeach him. So then we have to come back and we have to say, well, then what is the point of a governing body that refuses to check power? Because the reality is, if you can't check him, worse than him will be coming. If you cannot check him, worse than him will be coming. If you are letting a person that you know is consistently going above the rule of law with no checks and balances, and you're consistently letting him stack the courts with people who think just like him, that means even after he's out of office, you're going to have a system that's run by people who think just like him for the next 50 years. But you want to convince me that you're really for equality. Are you kidding me? So, he quoted Martin Luther King, who said, if America will rethink its destiny, and there will be few who are willing to do this, there's a possibility that America can be saved. He also quoted Martin Luther King, who said that black people in this country have been marooned on a tiny island of poverty in the midst of a sea of material prosperity. Black people have been stranded, basically. He said they've been stranded on a tiny island called poverty and left there in the midst of a sea of material prosperity all around them. And you expect them to not be upset about it. Just stay on the tiny island and don't make a whole lot of noise about it. But he said this. Martin Luther King also said, "We refuse to believe that the vaults of our nation are empty. We refuse to believe that the vaults of our nation are empty." He also said, Michael Eric Dyson said, that America does believe in reparations, and they do. Just go, type in U.S. reparations paid out, and you will see the countries that America paid out. But he said they just don't believe in reparations for black people. And the sad reality is, because they don't believe in reparations for black people, they're going to continue to beat around the bush. Most of us know how to play this game. If you've been living any length of time, when you don't want to do something, what do? You stall, right? Your parents may say, "I want you to do X, Y, and Z." You might start talking to your parents to distract them from what they asked you to do. You might suggest something else be done in the place of what they asked you to do. You don't necessarily go to your parents and say, "I'm not going to do what you asked me to do." You just stall. You just ask questions. You just divert their attention. Most of us have done this at some point in our life. And our parents look at us and say, "I'm not playing the radio with you. Do you think that I forgot what I asked you to do? Really? Oh, you're going to act like you didn't hear me by pretending to do something else and not what I asked you to do, right?" So that's what America has done. In many cases, America has done the ring around the rosy on Black America. Black America has been asking about reparations for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And white America keeps doing this. Let me tell you what they keep doing. For those of y'all who don't see the pattern. We're going to study the causes and effects of blackness in America. We're going to have research and more research and more research. And we're going to study the effects of what happened to y'all with the medical industry. We're going to study the effects of what happened with you with real estate. We're going to study the effects of what's happening to you in prison. We're going to study the effects of what's happening to you in schools. And these studies will go on for 10, 15, 20 years, and they will come back with data that already proves what we've already said. And then they will go back to the table again and say, "We need to further study this phenomenon." If I'm lying, somebody correct me. So at this point, 50 years later of wasted time, that's exactly what it is, because your research is coming back and telling you what black people have been telling you for 50 years. So instead of addressing the actual problems, and especially instead of writing the check, one that will not bounce on Black America, here we are, 50 years later, still doing research on things that black people have told you about for the past 50 years. And you think that the next generation is going to sit down and wait another 50 years for you to come to the same conclusion that the current generation is telling you about. So I've asked God about this. I'm like, God, what is about to happen? Reparations is a ridiculous notion for those who don't see the huge inequality. You know what? They do see the huge inequality. The conclusion I've come to is they do see the inequality. They're just not willing to make it equal. I can say I will give you social equality. That's a lot of what we see today. We think that social equality is political and economic equality. We think that because we see people on television screens, that all of a sudden everything is good and black people are doing well. We see symbols, we see tokens of wealth. We see the few wealthy black people on screen, and we think everybody in black America is doing as well as the few that we see that are put before us on television. When the reality is, over 50% of black America's net worth is like $1.55. Go look at the data. I know some of y'all didn't know that. Okay? But when your net worth as a black person in America is less than $5, and that's the majority of black people in America, then there is a plan to figure out what to do with these people who are not worth much. All right? But they don't have a plan to fix why you're not worth much. But they do have a plan to get rid of you because you're not worth much. They don't want to deal with why. The inequity is there. All right? Last piece I want to talk about on here, because I know I'm running out of time. He said, where is it? He talked about John F. Kennedy and R.F. Kennedy, and how when black people actually did get a chance during that time, James Baldwin, Lorraine Hansberry, a leader from the organization CORE, and I forget one more person, got a chance to actually have a conversation with the leaders of their day. And they actually told them all of the ways that black America was being marginalized, that their response to being told the truth about what was happening to black Americans, their response was not to address the wrongs. Their response was to sic the FBI on them because they were so outraged that black people had the nerve to come to the Oval Office and tell them off and tell them about themselves. One of the things, Deacon Henry, one of the things I asked God, I asked him about what is going to happen if America does not do right by black people. And one thing he said to me is, he said, if America does not do what they are supposed to do, that black people will get reparations, just not in the way America intended. They will get reparations because God is going to be handing them out. And if God has to hand out reparations, it ain't going to be pretty. Because we saw what happened in Exodus. We saw what happened the last time God had to hand out reparations to a nation. So I'm going to just leave it right there. Go read Exodus. If you don't understand what happens when God has to step in and hand out reparations and let his people go free because you don't want to do right. All right. A lot of people do not know about this particular woman. I'm just reading one section today from a Black History Reader, excuse me, by Dr. Claude Anderson, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. We're going to be on his Science and Medical Experiment section, all right, for this month. Question 91. What is the single most impactful and enduring medical contribution unknowingly made by a Black person in modern science? Without a doubt, one of the greatest medical contributions made unknowingly was that of Henrietta Lacks. There is a movie based on the life of Henrietta Lacks and a book. I have the book and I saw the movie. Interestingly enough, she was from this area. She was a poor Black tobacco farmer who was born in Southern Virginia, and she was treated for cervical cancer at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, which is still standing there today, in 1951. The doctors and scientists who treated her found that her cells had unique characteristics, ones that they had been trying unsuccessfully to formulate in the laboratory for many years. The cancer cells from Henrietta Lacks seemed to be immortal. They never died. They're still going today, by the way. Unlike other human cells, Lax's cells regenerated continuously and at an extraordinary rate. Literally, her cells are immortal. That's why they called her story The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. To this day, scientists do not know why her cells are immortal. I want you to think about that. A Black woman's cells are immortal. Just let that marinate. But they transformed medical science and created an entire advanced medical industry that made some researchers and others who had a part in monetizing her cells. Oh, because they did monetize her cells. She died. They didn't tell her family that they were using her cells to create all of these medical advancements and products. They monetized her cells, Black bodies again being consumed, and became enormously wealthy. Henrietta Lacks died a few months after her cancer diagnosis. I think that maybe they allowed her to die. Because, hey, if we're about to get rich off of your cells, then why would I save you from passing away? She died a few months after her cancer diagnosis, but her cells, designated as HeLa, short for Henrietta Lacks, so that's where you get the term HeLa from, by researchers, lived on. She never knew the major impact the cells taken from her cervix used without her permission or knowledge, or her family's permission or knowledge. She never knew the impact it would have on medicine or the wealth her cells would create for scientific researchers and their friends, while her family remained and continues to remain in poverty. So when somebody asks me, what we got to repent for? I don't know. It's like a million and a 1,011,000,000,000,000 things that we have to repent for in this nation. Her cells were grown and sold to researchers around the world. So not only did she help the United States medically advance, but as they sold her cells, her piece of genetic material, hint, hint, all of y'all giving away y'all genetic material for free to 23andMe and Ancestry.com and African Ancestry and all them sites. As as they sold her genetic material to researchers around the world, new businesses were created to produce the HeLa cells and the culture medium in which to grow them. Specialty businesses were also developed to package the cells and ship them to laboratories across the world. So she gave jobs to thousands of people. Businesses were created simply to facilitate distributing her cells. She is the Jeff Bezos, the Bill Gates, the Warren Buffett. She would have been that of the world. But everybody else is dividing the spoils based on her genetic material. I want you to think about that. Just let it marinate. Today, I want you to let that marinate. HeLa cells enabled Jonas Salk, S-A-L-K, to create the Salk vaccine and to respond quickly to the polio epidemic that was exploding in the 1950s. HeLa cells were used to grow viruses, conduct experiments, to test medicines, to map DNA, and other scientific research. They were in the first space missions to see what would happen to cells in zero gravity. They sent her cells to space. Gene mapping, cloning, in vitro fertilization are all scientific landmarks that were achieved because of the cells from the cervix of a poor Black woman with cancer. Now imagine what they're doing with all the healthy Black cells that people are handing over to DNA testing sites. Y'all don't hear me today. If they are able to do this, if they are able to pull immortality out of the cells of a poor Black woman who was ill with cancer, and they're still making money from it through today into perpetuity, imagine what they could do with the healthy cells of Black people. The story of Henrietta Lacks was told by investigative journalist Rebecca Skloot in her book, The Immortal Cells of Henrietta Lacks. In telling the story, Mrs. Skloot describes the many ways that profit was made from her cells, and the story raised numerous moral, legal, political, and financial issues. The medical industry has addressed the issue of permission now, but how many more people's cells did they hijack between then and the permission slip they now have? They address the issue of permission by requiring more thorough patient medical disclosure and permission forms. What does not seem to have been addressed, however, are the financial and ethical issues about the wealth and industry creation that bypassed her family entirely. Her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren see none of that income that was generated all over the world. There are many lessons for all in the story of Henrietta Lacks. Her story demonstrates that economic racism continues to be practiced in modern society, that the practice of so easily stealing Black assets, even to ourselves, and shifting the financial benefit to the white side of the ledger is so ingrained culturally that it generates no sense of wrongdoing, no outrage, and no corrective action in those who perpetrate it. Those who benefited financially from her unusual sales most likely are viewed and most likely view themselves simply as enterprising, respected, wealthy individuals. Henrietta Lacks, indeed, made a contribution that was important to medical science in many ways and continues to be. Oh, next week's question: how do some researchers connect race to AIDS and view its possible fabrication and African origin? This should be interesting to hear the facts on this. All right, we're moving on. Spare the kids. Why whooping children won't save Black America. I know some of y'all thought you were going to get away from this conversation. But we're talking about, in this chapter, in this book, Spare the Kids, all right, by Dr. Stacy Patton, we are talking about the fact that the master's lash, that whooping, was a slave. It was introduced in a slave culture. It did not come from Native American culture. Neither did it come from African culture. So your Black friends who are going around, who are talking about this is just what we do, I want you to correct them and tell them, no, this is not just what we do. This comes from slave culture and it has carried over into our culture, but it is not what we originally did. So let's talk about that. In the 18th century, missionaries observed that Indian parents viewed their children, as, quote, sacred gifts from the Creator. Well, that aligns with Scripture. Scripture tells you that children are a blessing from the Lord. They are a gift from God. They are arrows in your quiver. In other words, they become tools or weapons against the enemy. So, ask yourself the question, if children are supposed to be a weapon against the enemy, what we see people doing is pulling out their arrow and breaking it. That's what you do when you abuse children. You break your own weapons. You break your own arrows. Hitting a child was atypical. One missionary wrote that Indian parents fostered independence by letting their children follow their own inclinations and do what they like, and no one prevents them. Since the goal was independent, Indian parents feared that meant would make their children timid and submissive and not against sinful children who needed to be beaten into adulthood. Preachers told their congregations that children were sinful by nature, and they backed up their sermons by citing Proverbs 22:15. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far away. The fiery Pilgrim minister John Robinson's 1623 Treaty of Children and Their Education they urged parents to break the will of their sons and daughters. So if you're breaking a child's will, and your child's will is being broken in the public school system, and your child's will is being broken by bullies, and they come home to a parent who is further breaking their will, and then we can't figure out in the Black community why suicide is increasing. Are you kidding me? Hello, you're part of the problem. I know people don't want to hear that, but you're part of the problem. Because you haven't figured out that you're supposed to be cultivating something in your child, not breaking their will. You're supposed to be cultivating their soul, not breaking their will. Can I say that one more time? You're supposed to be cultivating their soul, not breaking their will. I get a little passionate about this subject because I see it too often. You're supposed to be cultivating their soul and not breaking their will. But the problem is, your will has been broken and your soul has been left uncultivated many times. So you yourself don't know how to do what has not been done to you. If someone has spent their life being broken, then guess what? When they produce a child, they're going to be doing to their child many times what has been done to them, unless they begin to reprogram their brain and realize that what people did to me did not work for me. What people did for me or did to me, right, was not successful. They might have been doing all they knew to do, but it wasn't right. So now I have to reprogram my mind as a parent to not fall into the patterns of doing what is comfortable just because it was done to me. People slap their children in the mouth to get them to shut up because that was done to them. And it's more convenient to slap your child in the mouth than it is to answer your child's questions. That takes time and that takes patience. So rather than patiently respond, we just slap the child in the mouth, and what you're doing is you are putting within your child, shut up. Because nobody is going to want to hear what you have to say. You slap them in the mouth enough time, they'll stop talking to you. They'll stop speaking to you because you have trained them that whenever I have something to say, my parent will not hear me. They're going to slap me in the mouth. And so they get to their teenage years and you wonder why they won't talk to you, why they won't speak to you, why they're being secretive. Why do their friends know more about them than you do as the parent? Because you have trained them to shut up and be quiet. By the way, that's not in the book. All right. So he says, surely there is in all children, though not alike, a stubbornness and stoutness of mind arising from natural pride, which must be broken and beaten down. And then the parents wonder why their children become passive, allow people to mistreat them, and they wind up in abusive relationships. Right. Because you as the parent groomed them for that. I know you want to think it's all on the public school, but it's not. Oh boy, let me get out of here. Reverend Cotton Mather. This is the reverend who believed that black people should be enslaved, that they were not really truly human, that you could save their souls, but you could keep their bodies in slavery. This is what he had to say, that this is what people were going by at the time. He said, better to whip your children than for them to be damned. This was the guy, the same man who was involved in the Salem witch trials that, by the way, when you go and study it, had black women being called witches and being accused of witchcraft and being drowned. Most of the people who died in the Salem witch trials, they're not going to tell you this. Most of the people who were killed were black. Because some little girls lied and said that somebody taught them some magic. And so they brought a whole bunch of people out. Yeah, I didn't know that either, Henry, until I started digging. So the black church needs to really be careful about using terms like Jezebel and calling people witches, because you're actually repeating some things that happened in the past, where when people were called that, they were actually drug out and abused and tortured and forced to admit to something they weren't, and then they were murdered. 20 people, by the way. And this guy never apologized for his part in the Salem witch trials of killing innocent people. But now he's giving advice on beating your children basically to keep them out of hell. The same guy who got 20 other people killed innocently, this is the advice that he's giving. In a sermon on parenting, Mather's contemporary, the Reverend Benjamin Wadsworth, said of newborns, their hearts naturally are a nest, a root, a fountain of sin and wickedness, an evil treasure from whence proceed evil things. Their hearts are unspeakably wicked, estranged from God. You're saying this about a newborn? Really? This is how you view a newborn coming into the world? Well, it's no wonder you would try to kill your children and dash their heads against rocks and all this other kind of crazy stuff. That's how you feel. Meanwhile, I don't know. I guess they skip the scriptures on children are a blessing from God and a heritage from the Lord. I guess they skipped that part. I guess they skipped over where Jesus said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me, for such is the kingdom of heaven." That's what Jesus said. I don't recall this sermon from Jesus about their hearts are unspeakably wicked. All right. Let me finish with one last sentence from this book. Not surprisingly, there was little concern in colonial America about child maltreatment, which meant that many abused children went without protection. As children were considered property, their parents were allowed to treat them as they saw fit, and prosecutions for abuse were rare and mostly involved servants who beat their apprentices. There were a few cases of children who were removed from their homes, not because of abuse though, but because parents were not instilling proper religious training and a strong work ethic in their offspring. Unlike many Native American children who were not physically punished by their parents and were encouraged to be autonomous, misbehaving Puritan children were branded. You know, like what they do with the Greeks? They were branding their children. Wow. They were branded. They were sentenced to hard labor like a prison camp. They were tied to wooden posts and beaten with whips and canes and switches and paddles. Hello, Black family. In the town center or outside the court or the church or the schoolyard, because wherever you show out is where you're going to be laid out. Hello, Black family. Sometimes a child's head and hands were tied in place in a wooden pillory or stretch neck, where they were left standing in a bent position while passers-by teased them and threw trash and rotten food at them. This is what they allowed to happen to their own children. We're talking about Puritans in America. In the 1640s, Connecticut and Massachusetts passed the Stubborn Child Laws, which required the death penalty for children over the age of 16 who disobeyed, who cursed, or hit their parents, or denied that the Bible was the absolute word of God. You talk about fostering rebellion? When is the last time that Jesus tied us up and beat us? I'll wait. When is the last time we did exactly what God told us not to do, and God responded to us in any of these ways? Even Peter, even Judas, who literally turned Jesus over to the authorities, Even Jesus didn't respond to them in that manner. Questions, comments. You can tap on the two faces and give us your comment today, give us your question today. I'll wait a couple minutes. For those of you who have tuned in today, I want to thank you for tuning in to Daring Dialogues. I have been your host. I hope I have said something that has been thought provoking today. Pastor Ben, I'm going to take you, and then Lady Barbara, if you will click back in again, I will get you next. Hello. Uh-oh. Let me try it again. Allowing me to. Pastor Ben, try it again. All right, let me press it. Hopefully it'll come in this time. It's counting down. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
That's great. That's great. Many of the things that you were talking about, especially when you were talking about the America,
Mm-hmm.
and the way our white brothers and sisters think. Because I run across that. Well, you know, we all run across this thing, playing the race card.
Mm-hmm.
I came across that a couple of days ago. My response was, okay, your ancestors invented the game, shuffled the cards, cut the cards, gave us the cards they wanted us to have. So when we play that card, you want to complain.
Mm.
You don't get that luxury.
Right.
See, you don't get that luxury. We're speaking the truth. We're telling you what's going on. You know, and it's like, and I'm like you. I've come to the same conclusion that you have. It's not that they don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just that they don't want anything to be done about it.
That right there. Stay right there. I want to read this statement really quickly. Something that just came up on breaking news. I don't have time to talk about it right now. But it looks as if mega church pastor Paula White has angered some people by threatening to cut them. So you guys will have to check that out after we get off. But I'm not surprised that she would say that. It is alleged that she said it, but I'm not surprised that she would say that. When you talk about they know, I'm trying to get to this statement. Here it is. This is from Reverend Tracy Blackman. She said, this was on March 31st. She said, today between my services, an elderly white man came up to me and introduced himself by telling me he was raised to be a racist, but he eventually figured it out. I asked him, might we unpack that statement? And he agreed to do so. I think our conversation was mutually appreciated and became so animated that another middle aged white man joined in and made the same confession. They both began to reveal how their parents explicitly and implicitly groomed them in white supremacy. It turns out that some white families do have the talk. It's just not the same talk that black families have.
Mm-hmm.
So black families have the
Yeah.
talk of you have to be careful in America because of the color of your skin. There are crazy people out here who will kill you for no apparent reason. Watch your back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any black family. Well, let me take that back. There are some black families who actually have gotten away from the talk. And then when their children experience racism, then they want to be shocked and appalled. But most of the families I grew up with had the talk. You understood. You were prepared for the possibility that someone is not going to see you as a human being because of the color of your skin. And what she is saying is there has been two white people that came up to her and said, yeah, we had a talk as well. We had to talk about how we are better than or superior to other people. So some people are explicitly teaching their children this.
Yes. And well, Jane Elliott, I know you know of her, you follow some of her things, and she alluded to that you're taught to be racist.
Yes.
You're taught that. All white people are taught that. They may not know it. Matter of fact, this same guy, it was a statement that was made, and I said that was racist, right? He said, let me call him a racist. I said, listen, you see the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you're benefiting. Racism is a system. Racism stems from a system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's how you become racist. It's a system. And
Right.
you benefit from that.
Right.
Now, you see the problem. If you're not doing anything to correct that problem, you are a racist.
You're in what I call passive compliance.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who are actively complying with the system of racism, meaning they are the ones who are specifically discriminating. They are using the terminology. They are putting blockades in the way of people, not having access to certain things. And then there's what I call passive compliance, meaning you see what's happening and you are not doing anything to come against the system.
Mm-hmm.
You're not talking to anybody in your family about the
Right.
system, right? You're remaining quiet. You're saying that's just the way things are. You're saying, get over it. It happened so long ago. You're saying, well, my family didn't own slaves, which may be true, but your family benefited from the system already in place. Even if your family came over here later, right? If your family immigrated from Russia or Italy or Ireland or wherever, or Poland, they benefited from a system that was already set up for them to take advantage of. They came to America to take advantage of a system called whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave up their ethnos in another country many times. Some of them still retain pieces of their ethnos, right? With things like St. Patrick's Day.
Right.
But for the most part, they gave up their ethnos to take on the identity of whiteness so that they could get the goods and the benefits that was reserved under whiteness. If you came here and you were assimilated into the identity of whiteness, you were guaranteed land, you were guaranteed free labor, human beings. All right? You were guaranteed the ability to be taught how to farm. Those were guarantees if you left your country and came over here to America and they assimilated you into whiteness. Now, it took some of them longer to be assimilated in, but the fact remains, when we say white people, they will raise their hand.
Yes.
All right? So your family might not have started it off, but they sure benefited from the system that was in place. And so if you're not even willing to own that bit of truth, it's still a problem. I want to read this. Thank you, Pastor Ben.
You're welcome.
Take care. Lady Barbara, you can click in if you're still here with us. This comes from South Pacific. All right. This was a film, a musical based on racial relationships. This is the song from South Pacific. It says, you've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be carefully taught. There are people who live that creed. They live it. teaching their children before they get a certain age. I'm sorry, Lady Barbara, if you can do that one more time. There it is. All right, let me click add you in. Five, four, three, two, one. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Good
I
afternoon.
was I was just reflecting back when you last night when you shared Dr. Dyson's speech, and I was just reflecting back as you were speaking about the racism and how he said once they approached Robert Kennedy
Mm-hmm.
that he finally broke down and said that he couldn't imagine how it would feel to be born black and the suffering in this country. But look what they had to go through to get him to even open his eyes to even view that.
Yeah.
But yet, the other thing that Dr. Dyson said was the divided tongue of the Kennedys and
Mm-hmm.
how they portrayed that they were so for us as
Mm-hmm.
a black people. But then after that conversation, like he said, they sicked the FBI on those same people
Mm-hmm.
and followed them and called them communists and everything. So I was just viewing it's every time that we stand for something, there's always, if we go back in our history, they, like you said, they label us lazy, but they don't go back and tell about Tulsa and all of the communities that was destroyed because we as a people were trying to build our own community and have our own. And then when you look back at you, I'm a point I'm gonna go to Nancy Pelosi. There's no reason to impeach him because it had such an impact on the Republican Party, and we don't want to see that happen to us. And then another thing,
Mm-hmm.
Kamala Harris, when they asked her what would she do for black people, her response was no. And the way that she said it,
Mm-hmm.
it really penetrated. So here we are. I'm praying. You said I was praying, Lord, this coming president election, who do we vote for? Because no one have our best interests at heart. No one have our best interests. So where do we have to look to the hills and the kingdom because there's no help for us as a people. And one thing Dr. Dyson was talking about, they have amnesia of the past of our history. And they want us to say, why are y'all still talking about it? Just get over it. It just breaks your heart to have lived through some of the segregation and all the things that I was witness to see that Dr. King went through, and then to have them take his life, so abruptly like that because they feared that us coming together as a people, because they were saying he had the power to bring black people together. But also Dr. Dyson said something else. He wasn't celebrated till after he was gone because everybody did not support him. He didn't get all those accolades from black people because they thought then he was a sellout. They didn't understand that he was fighting for a cause for equality, but things that we should not to have to, because he was talking about the 100 years
Mm-hmm.
of this. And Dr. King has gone on, and we're still here in 2019. And we're asking, can you repair reparation? You have other people have benefited, the Japanese and Native American, but when our country, and the thing about it is, I had an experience, and I'm just gonna go. It's amazing how people will use you of another race for your services. And I made this statement to a white woman. I got to tell you,
Tell me.
my ancestors have worked free and built this country. I'm not being a servant no longer.
Listen.
We worked for free. We built this country. Our ancestors worked for free and built this nation and was not compensated. So now you're telling me in 2019 you still want black people to be servants? I think not. Thank you, Pastor.
Ooh, child. Yeah. If you want to check out the seminar that Dr. Dyson gave last night. You can go to my page, Black Table Talk. Let me make sure that it posted, because I believe I put it up last night. And I'm just going to make sure that it has posted and nobody has tried to get it taken down. It is still on there. So if you go to Black Table Talk and look at yesterday's post, it's up from about 10 hours ago. I posted the entire lecture that he gave. It was an hour and a half. So obviously I couldn't go over every single thing that he said, but Lady Barbara brought out some more points. Martin Luther King was not a popular man. He's popular now because people have whitewashed much of what he said. But he was not popular in his day. There were black people who were like, as he said in the lecture, there were black people who were like, I'm not with this, I'm not marching. I will take my nickel of pay and I'm just gonna live and exist. I don't want to rock the boat. This man is causing too much problems. I just want to get my nickel and go. And then there are white people who hated Dr. King as well, who are now acting like they were so in love with him, when in reality, they didn't like him either. And we're talking about older people who lived during that time. They didn't like Dr. King then either, but now all of a sudden it's kumbaya. So people are in many ways trying to rewrite the narrative of our history, and we need to know the truth for ourselves. That's why it's important to read. That's why it's important to go and look at what Dr. King actually said and wrote. That's why it's important to go back and look at the actual footage from that time. All right? Many churches, thank you, Lady Evelyn, many churches did not support him, black or white. Billy Graham, who initially gave his support to Martin Luther King, pulled back and began to condemn him. But black people love Billy Graham. But y'all see what Billy Graham's son doing. Y'all see what Billy Graham's son doing. And y'all think it's just Franklin. Honey, I'm going to need y'all to wake up. Y'all think it's just Franklin. Where do you think Franklin got his ethos from? Come on, y'all can't, come on, people. Y'all think that Franklin just out of the blue is just so supportive of this particular administration for no reason? You all think Franklin is just supportive of this administration for no apparent reason? No, Franklin had a daddy. Exactly, Pastor Ben. It was ingrained, and people don't want to see that, but it was ingrained. It was ingrained. I'm gonna post this article that I see coming up on my scroll here about an evangelical female minister threatening to cut people. Let's see what that's about today. We might talk about it tomorrow. If not, we'll probably cover it on Thursday, on Theology Thursday. Listen, I want to thank you all for your time and attention. Thank you for rocking with us today, as my Just Thinking Out Loud friend says, Apostle Sonia Green. Remember, I know it's getting darker in the day out here. I know things are looking like what in the world is going on in our world. But remember, that's why you're here. That's why God created you. That's why he gave you the sensibilities and the skills and the gifts and the talents and the wisdom and the insight that he gave to you. Because light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So please go out today and be light. Take care. Thank you for giving us some extra time today. Read. Reading is fundamental. Care for somebody today. Give somebody a word of encouragement. And don't forget to encourage yourself and speak over yourself. They say nobody's coming to save us. I would say nobody in the earth realm may be coming, but the King of Glory sure is. So trust in him because human flesh can't fail us. So put your trust in God because God doesn't fail. He shows up right on time. Take care and God bless.